Good day po sa ating lahat and to our very own Professor Engineer Ryan De Lara. Good day, sir. So I'm going to report Research and Policy Analysis, Part 1. So by the way, I'm Engineer Louie Serrano, electrical engineer by profession, affiliated in DEPSU as Instructor 1. The contents of this presentation, I have 3 chapters. The quantitative methods for policy analysis by Kapeng Yang, the use and misuse of surveys research in policy analysis by Jerry Michel, and the last is the social experiments and public policy by Caroline Danielson. So what is all about quantitative methods for policy analysis by Kapeng Yang? So introduction, policy analysis involves using quantitative and or qualitative techniques to define a policy problem, demonstrate its impacts, and present potential solution. It requires sophisticated methods such as modeling, quantification, descriptive statistics, statistical inference, operation research, cost-benefit analysis, and risk-benefit analysis. So ito yung mga techniques na lagi natin ginagamit in policy studies. So this chapter discusses the use of quantitative methods in policy analysis, kung saan magbibigay ito ng general understanding sa paggamit ng quantitative methods sa policy analysis. The chapter has 2 major sections. The first section briefly reviews the emergence and evolution of quantitative methods in policy analysis, discussing their origin, change, use, and education. So ito yung ito yung matutukoy natin kung paano ito mabuo o magsimula. The second section introduces some quantitative methods that are widely used in policy analysis. So ito naman is tumutukoy o naglalaman kung ano ang iba't ibang mga methods na ginagamit sa policy analysis. So history of quantitative methods in policy analysis. Policy science, like other social science discipline, it has to use analytic methods to model policy dynamics and solve policy problems. So policy science, bilang multi-method, multidisciplinary and problem-oriented, ay mas concerned sa mapping ng policy process, policy, alternatives, and ano yung policy outcomes. So quantitative methods have long been used in public decision making. So from the history from 1910s to 1950s, 1960s rather. So nagsimula sa 1910s, the New York Bureau of Municipal Research in 1910s started to use social science method to systematically study urban problems. In 1922, the Bureau of Agricultural Economics was created within the U.S. Department of Agriculture to examine the relationship between agriculture and the economy and to develop better economic policies. In 1941, the Office of Scientific Research and Development was established in 1941 to coordinate scientific activities during World War II. In 1946, the Employment Act of 1946 created the Council of Economic Advisors. In early 1950, the management science, system engineering, and cost-effectiveness analysis became widely used in the United States in the early 1950s. Throughout the 1950s, the RAND Corporation, founded in 1948, to do policy analysis work for the government, especially the Department of Defense. Finally, developed the technique into system analysis, a tool used in the military. So last in the history is the 1960s, is what we call this is golden age for system analysis and policy analysis. So ayun, up to 1980s. So 1965, President Johnson required all federal agencies to prepare planning documents and issue analysis paper to back up their recommendation to the Bureau of Budget. In 1968, the University of Michigan organized its Institute of Public Administration into the Institute of Public Policy Studies. And in 1969, the National Environmental Policy Act mandated impact analysis in environment policy making. And 1970s to 1980s, use of quantitative policy analysis methods, and last is the 1990s, democratization for policy analysis. So quantitative statistical methods. So statistic analyzes data to compare variances and make decision. So para mapag-aralan. So what are the two types of statistic? The descriptive statistic and the inferential statistic. Descriptive statistic enable policy analysts to summarize data effectively and meaningfully. So while the inferential statistic is the use of quantitative techniques to generalize from a sample to a population. So para makapili ng tamang technique policy analysis, kailangan isaalang-alang ang research purpose, ang sample size, distribution of the data, ang bilang ng dependent and independent variables, mga uri ng measurement scale employed ng variables. So in order to choose the right technique, policy analysis have to consider the research purpose, the sample sizes, the distribution of the data, the number of dependent and independent variables, and the type of measurement skills employed by the variables. So univariate and bivariate analysis. From the word uni and bi. So uni means 1 and bi is 2. So univariate or descriptive statistics summarize a body of raw data so that the data can be more easily understood. Bivariate analysis, ito naman yung test whether and how two variable is statistically related with another variable. So this is the univariable and bivariate analysis. So under univariate data involving a single variable. Yeah, single variable from the word uni, while the bivariate data involving two variables. So does not deal with causes or relationship. Ito naman sa bivariate deals with causes or relationship. In univariate data, the major purpose of univariate analysis is to describe, while the bivariate data, the major purpose of bivariate analysis is to explain. So, tingnan natin yung mga difference niya from uni to bivariate. So, central tendency mean, mode, median, dispersion, range, variance, maximum, minimum, quartiles, standard deviation, frequency distribution, bar graph, histogram, pie chart, line graph, box, and whisker plot. So in bivariate data, analysis of two variables simultaneously, correlation, comparison, relationship, causes, explanation. Tables where one variable is contingent on the values of the other variable, independent and dependent variable. So sample, we have a example here. How many of the students in the freshman class are female under univariate data? And then under bivariate data sample, is there a relationship between the number of females in computer programming and their scores in mathematics? So yun yung magkakaiba ng univariate and bivariate analysis. So, linear regression, ano na, pag linear yan. Alam natin formula, ganyan lang. Y is equal to A plus BX plus E. Linear regression or ordinary least square regression is to find the best line function to describe a relationship that can minimize the squared error. It's general form. Ito nga, yung formula na to. So, line lang siya. A plus BX plus E. In which A is the intercept, B is the slope. So, alam naman natin sa ating college day, yung intercept and slope form, and is the error term. The formula for B, the regression coefficient is, ito yun. So, ANOVA. So, analysis of variance. Ito yung ANOVA. ANOVA is a dependence technique that explains the variation of metric-dependent variable based on a set of non-metric o yung categorical independent variables. Its general form is, ito yun, yung y sub 1 is yung metric, and then yung non-metric, ito yung mga x sub 1 plus x sub 2 plus x sub 3 plus so on up to x sub n. ANOVA helps determine whether samples from two or more groups come from population with equal means. It is a primary tool for analyzing experimental data. To use ANOVA, the data has to satisfy the assumption of linearity, normality, or the dependent variable is normally distributed, and equal variance o yung variance are equal for all treatment groups. Now, however, F-tests in ANOVA are robust regarding this assumption except in extreme cases. The equal variance assumption is often ignored if the number of cases in each group is similar. So, multi-regression analysis examine the relationship between a single metric dependent o yung criterion variable and a set of metric independent o yung predictor variables. General form is y. Ito yung metric, and then yung non-metric is a plus beta sub 1 x1 plus beta 2 sub 2 x sub 2 plus beta sub 3 x sub 3 plus beta n sub x sub n plus epsilon. Regression may be used to calculate the predictive value of y for any given value of x. Regression analysis is the most widely used and versatile dependence technique in policy analysis for the purpose of prediction or explanation. So, sa time series analysis identifies the pattern of change across time in order to explain the phenomenon and to predict the future based on historical and existing patterns. It enables policy analysts to examine a variable such as unemployment rate and economic growth over equally spaced interval of time such as month and year. Ito yung general form niya. X sub t is equal to a sub 1 multiplied by x sub t is minus 1 plus 2a sub n multiplied by x t minus n. So time series analysis is important to policy analysis since policy change is crucial question, and time series analysis permits data based on forecasting. So in general, time series can serve three purposes: analysis of trends and forecasting, casual analysis, and program and policy analysis by Barbridge 1983. So event history analysis o yung EHA. So event history analysis is used to explain why certain units of analysis, individuals, organization, or states, etc., are more likely to experience the events of interest than others. It is a specialized subfield of time series analysis that analyze rare events time series in which most data are non-events. So ito yung ang data sa Event history analysis, ito yung data na sinusukat ang bilang o yung timing and sequences of changes sa isang variable interest. So the key concept of EHCA o yung event history analysis include a set of unit of analysis that have yet to experience a particular event, a survivor function, the decline in the size of risk over time, and the hazard rate, the rate of at which particular events occurring at a particular time. So, event history analysis o yung EHA, ito yung assume na possible mahula ang dependent variable within a certain time frame. So ito yung event history analysis model and EHA model was developed as yun. Adapt, fiscal party, elect to, income, religion, ito yung lang. So ito yung mga meaning lang. Adapt the probability that state I will adapt a lottery in a year T. So basahin na lang natin, ano na lang, pakiintindihan na natin sa ating PowerPoint. Let's proceed sa ating natin. Next slide. So, factor analysis. Factor analysis is an interdependence technique in which all variables are simultaneously considered and factors are created to explain the variable set. So, the factor analysis has three basic purposes. Number one, to identify factor structure underlying the variables, to achieve data reduction, and to test the relationship among variables, so yung F. So, ang factor analysis ay based sa fundamental assumption that's some underlying factor kung saan maliit ang bilang kaysa bilang ng observed variables. Ito ay responsable para sa conversion among observed variables. So, factor analysis, ito yung general form. Yun, pakitandaan. And then, pakibasa na lang sa slide, PowerPoint na i-upload ko sa ating G-class. So, X sub 1 is equal to B sub 1 multiplied by F sub 1 up to B sub n multiplied by F sub n plus D1 multiplied by U1. So, ito yung mga ibig sabihin ng mga letter na yan. So, factor analysis has two types. Confirmatory factor analysis and the exploratory factor analysis. So, confirmatory factor base is used with path analysis for structural equation modeling. While exploratory factor analysis cases are being grouped, then it becomes Q method or cluster analysis. If variable are being grouped, then it is the R-type factor analysis. So, path analysis. What is path analysis? Path analysis is used to test the indirect and causal relationship among the variables specified in the model. Policy analysis first draw a path diagram based on a theory or a set of hypotheses, then estimate path coefficient using regression techniques, and finally determine the indirect effects. So ito yung very useful when dealing in mediating effects kung saan ang independent variable ay may impact on a intervening variable kung saan may impact ito sa dependent variable. So, path analysis. So, ito yung mga table, principal component analysis, research from Warner and Hebdon. Yung mga description, so yung information and service quality, efficiency, and yun. So, game theory naman. So, what is game theory? Game theory is a mathematical approach to individual decision making that employs games as paradigms of rational decision maker interaction. A game is any interaction between agents that is governed by a set of rules specifying the possible moves for each participant and a set of outcomes for each possible combination of moves. So, ang game theory ay pure strategy na binubuo ng interrelated components. The players, who may be people or organization, kung sino yung pipili sa mga list of option or strategies available to them. Then, sa bawat stage ng play, ang players ay pipili ng course of action from a set of possible decisions. Then, the action lead to outcome and consequences. So, parang ito yun. So, the player, kung pipili ng kung sino yung gagawa action, kung possible, kung sino yung mga pipili ng course of action, and then the action lead to outcomes. So, ito yun. Ayan. So, the prisoner dilemma relates to the issue of trust, the pre-rider problem, public goods, negotiation, regulation, corruption, and conflict resolution. So, ito yung mga table natin sa prisoner dilemma. So, from prisoner 1, so prisoner 2, ito, strategy A and B. Ito yung mga strategy A and B din sa prisoner 1. Ito yung mga ano niya, simulation. So, siyempre, meron tayong simulation. It is a quantitative procedure by which analysts build mathematical models of policy process that are difficult to solve analytically and then run the models on a series of organized trial and error experiments in order to simulate the behavior of the system over time. So, a good simulation should satisfy the following condition. Siyempre, the calibrated, check, and flexible. So, let's proceed to second topic, the use and misuse of survey-based research in policy analysis by Jerry Mitchell. So, introduction, the use of survey research is also a part of policy analysis. Surveys are conducted to identify public needs, to discover support and opposition to policies, and to evaluate satisfaction and dissatisfaction with programs. Surveys can be applied to every stage of the policy process to identify problems, consider the worth of solution, determine legislative support of laws, appraise implementation difficulties, and measure outcomes. Surveys are relevant to many policy areas: the environment, social welfare, economic development, education, healthcare, civil rights, criminal justice, and foreign affairs. The purpose of this chapter is to examine the use of survey in policy analysis. The first part identifies the elements of survey research. The second part provides example of how survey address various policy questions. And the last part examines problems with the survey research enterprise. So the elements of survey research, there are 4 things to consider when undertaking survey. So, first, selecting the best type of survey to use. Kung ano ang survey type na babagay. Number 2, developing good questions. Siyempre, yung easily answer the questions. Number 3, determining who should be survey. So, kung sino yung mga population o yung group of people na to be surveyed. And then, last, yung analyzing the results. So, ito yung complying the all results, then analyzing the results by the use of survey. So we have types of survey. Siyempre, meron pwedeng telephone. So required o telephone o cellphone. Required is a phone numbers, and a caller. And then in person, involves face-to-face, face-to-face contact between interviewer and the respondents. And this last is the self-administered. Ito yung mga distributed to respondents for completion, can be distributed in 4 ways. First, through email. Number 2, posting on a website. Number 3, left particular sites. and then pass out people as they enter or leave buildings, street. So those are the types of surveys. So yun nga, as I said, self-administered surveys are distributed to respondent for the completion. Surveys can be distributed information sent through the email and returned in the mail, sent through email or posted on a website and returned via email or by entering information on a website, left at particular site on a table or counter and either returned by email or to the site or Dropbox, etc. Pass out to people as they enter or leave buildings, street rooms, or other venues. So questioners. Surveys are all about questions. The conundrum is that questionnaire construction is more of an art than a science. There is no exact prescription for how any questions should be asked in surveys. Although there are books that provide some guidelines for asking question. So yung what is conundrum? So conundrum ito yung problem. Magkakaroon ng conundrum. So ito yung ibig sabihin, yung conundrum is the problem. So in this survey, we have two types of question, yung close-ended question and open-ended question. So yung close-ended question, ito yung answerable by yes or no. And while the open-ended question, usually ito yung respondent will allow to write their answer. So yun yung two types of question. And then survey question, operationalize variables. Ito yung mga independent variables is one a behavior, attitude, or need. While the independent variable is what is being explained or accounted for. And then survey question can be nominal, ordinal, or interval level measure. So nominal level measure contains distant categories without any ordering, and ordinal measure is the set of ordered categories, and then yung interval level or interval measure is the every value is its own category. So ang level of measurement ng question ay mahalaga dahil it determines kung anong uri ng statistical analysis ang maaaring gamitin. So after questionnaire, respondents. So there are two approaches to deciding who to survey. The entire population of interest and the sample of population. So pag maliit ang population, everyone, so surveyed. Then pag large population, sampling is used, that is to draw a subset of population. So there are two types of sample, probability and non-probability. So probability sample is one which names are drawn from a population whose size and characteristics are known. Can calculate sampling error, while non-probability sample is one where names are selected from a population whose size characteristics are unknown. So whether it is a probability or non-probability sample, a survey researcher endeavors to have a large enough sample size to approximate the population to have a response rate above 50% and to make sure that all of the questionnaire in the survey estimate are answered. The quality of a sample is dependent on the sample and how it will be used. So let's proceed to the data analysis. The surveys yield numbers, but subjective questions produce objective statistics. There are many techniques for determining the accuracy of survey results, such as the chi-square statistic, correlation, coefficient, and Parsons. So, which can be calculated using a statistical software package, yung mga to. So, chi-square statistic Statistic measure the significance of bivariate between nominal level variables. And then person, ito yung measure of the strength of association between two interval level of variables. So correlation coefficient measure the strength of the relationship among the multiple interval levels variables. So the type of statistic used to assess the value of relationships is dependent on how questions are measured, the sample size, and the audience for the analysis. Survey data can be presented in a narrative or in graphs and tables. With enough information presented for easy interpretation. So kapag ang lahat ng data are collected, maaari itong i-present ito sa written graph or table kung saan dapat complete ang data para sa madaling pag-interpret. After a conclusion or recommendation section, an appendix may include the survey instrument with the responses to its questions. So, ano yung mga use of surveys? There are several ways surveys are used to examine public policies. Their uses are illustrative. So, assessing the need for policies, understanding the support and opposition to solution, evaluating the responsiveness of policies to individual and groups. So, need assessment. Policy analysts assess the need for policies among various segments of the public by asking people what they need and letting them self-define the concept. An example of a needs assessment is a survey conducted by the New York City Department of Small Business Service to determine the need for a business improvement district o yung BID o BID. When the survey results show overwhelming agreement on the severity of the problems in an area, the city council has more reason to approve the establishment of BID. So, sabihin dito, yung Business Improvement District, ito yung mga professionally managed enterprise whose purpose is to improve a local using funds from mandatory special fees or fees paid by property or business owner in a legally designated area. So, opinion polling. The surveys are used to measure the support and opposition to alternative solution in the policy process. In 2001, a proposal to construct a publicly funded stadium in the Minneapolis St. Paul was seriously affected by a public opinion survey conducted by the St. Paul Pioneer Press, which found that 62% of likely voters polled in St. Paul and 71% of those queried in Minneapolis opposed any significant public financing for a new ballpark for the Twins. This resulted in the proposal being rejected by the city council. So what is the impact assessment? Surveys are used to assess policy outcomes, as it is important to measure the satisfaction of a segment of the public policy. So ito yung mga survey flow. Ito, the misuse of surveys. Surveys have three problems. Surveys are frequently completed that are methodologically flawed. Surveys are regularly conducted that are politically biased. Surveys are used inappropriately as a substitute for other forms of democratic engagement. So the survey flaws, the fact is that everyone can conduct a survey without any expertise whatsoever, and there is no survey policy to 376 Handbook of Public Policy Analysis, all bad researchers away. The penalty for poor research is to critique the analysis, which happen only occasionally, or to ignore the results, which happens all the time. So survey flow is not easy to create the perfect survey, because it's easy to find surveys with unrepresentative samples comprise of a small number of people who choose to participate. So low response rates, highly ambiguous questions. So ill-defined words in the questionnaire, responses to complex subject limited to yes and no answer. And a statistic that provide percentage, but the actual number of people who responded to the questions. Ito naman survey bias. Survey can be methodologically sound, yet biased. A tendency in policy analysis is for survey to be created for no other reason than to rationalize, advocate, and attack public policies. In other words, surveys in policy analysis are often more political instrument than scientific endeavors. So, undemocratic surveys. So, final issue in survey research is the presumption that best measure of any public policy is to have a set of responses to survey questions. In effect, responding to survey has become a substitute for other forms of democratic engagement, attending public hearings, writing letters to the use and misuse of survey in policy analysis, 377 public official, and voting in election. So surveys are an important tool for citizens to express their views and shape public policy. However, they have a low cost and benefit to those being interviewed, and not all respondents react the same to questionnaires. Additionally, surveys tend to reinforce social inequality and exclude all kinds of people, such as children, people in institutions, and individuals. Polls tends to exclude households without phone service, devaluing the opinions of those with lower incomes, less stable jobs, and fewer group and community of attachment. The intent of survey is not to force people to have opinions, but to understand the public interest. Simplistic surveys may produce a convoluted mismatch of ideas and opinions that don't indicate anything other than most people are confused. So let's proceed to the last topic, the social experiment and public policy by Caroline Danielson. So social experiments randomly assign people to a group subject to one or more policy treatments or to one that remains subject to the prevailing policy. So, ito yung set of people, sample yung mga, yung mga assigned people to a group subject. Ito yung mga set of people, like yung mga neighborhoods o yung mga communities natin. They are widely accepted as the only methodology that can isolate the impact of a program, but they also hold respect from those crafting social policies. So in this chapter, I examine the key factors that make social experiment attractive to both researcher and policy makers. So evolution of social experimentation. So Greenberg's, Links, and Mandel and the digest of the social experiment review the story of social experiment in the United States. So large-scale social experiment were proposed in the 1960s and required organizational capacity to handle the new demand. The War on Poverty provided funding and federal agency Loki to stimulate policy research in this field. Most social experiments have been conducted with poor population. So, noong 1960s, yung umalis sila sa paggamit ng normal practice sa policy research. So, ito yun. So, yung evolution of social experimentation. The New Jersey Negative Income Tax Experiment, o yung NIT, was conducted by Mathematica under contract from the University of Wisconsin Institute for Research on Poverty. So it had several treatment groups, each of which was subject to a different combination of a minimum guaranteed income and tax rate on income earned above the guarantee. So, ito yung meron itong mga treatment groups. Sa bawat groups ay may subject na iba't ibang combination ng minimum guaranteed income tax experiment o yung income tax at tax rate. The core aim of the experiment was to test whether adults would reduce their hours of work if they knew they were guaranteed a minimum income. So, ang goal ng experiment ay tignan ang mga adults kung babawas ba nila ang oras sa pagtatrabaho kapag alam nila na guaranteed ang kanilang minimum income. So, however, as the experiment progressed, its aims grew more constrained to compute the mean impacts of the program. So, this type of experiment is called black box experiment because researchers make no strong claims about the underlying causes of the outcomes. So the scaling back of researcher ambition was due to technical difficulties in collecting data. So kaya ang results ng NIT o yung negative income tax experiment ay di malinis gaya ng inaasahan ng goal sa pag-conduct ng social experiment. So black box experiment report the outcome attribute it to the treatment. So and stop there. This approach has won the approbation of policy makers and backs the methodological rigor of experimental evaluation. So MDRC's 1988 overall the AFDC program included provision for the evaluation of its effect using randomized experiments. So yung goal sa pag-conduct ng social experiment ay pagkasunduan ng ibain sa estimating means impact of treatments. So the early and mid-1990s marked a high point in policy evaluation due to the widespread use of experimental methodology. So in Section 413 of the Social Security Act allowed states to experiment with their AFTC programs, and 43 states obtained waivers between 1993 and 1996. So this encourages states to perform randomized experimental evaluation of their programs, producing a wealth of data that would not otherwise exist. However, the pace of experimentation has since slowed in the welfare policy arena, and commentators continue to call for experimental evaluation of policy proposal. So nuts and bolts of experiments. To conduct an experiment, researcher randomly assign some members of target group to the program under study and some to the current program. The impact of the treatment is measured as the mean difference between the treatment and control groups on relevant measures. So ito yung gaano karami less income ang nagawa ng treatment group na kinita sa katapusan ng study period, or sino ang nakakuha ng pinakamataas na treatment group score sa standardized test administered sa dalawang group. So conception of causality. So policymakers seek an answer to the core question of whether a program will produce the desired outcome. So social experiments address this question by posing a counterfactual. What would have happened had the program not existed? Experiments are a powerful means of attributing the impact of the intervention. So dito, kung ano ang mangyayari if yung program na yon ay di mag-exist. Dito, sabi sa what would have happened had the program not existed. So, di natin alam. So, questionable. Experiments are a powerful means of attributing the impact of the intervention to the outcomes observed by the researcher by posing a counterfactual. What would have happened at the program that existed. The central difference between the two difference between the two questions is generalizability as experiments tell us nothing directly about law-like behavior. So, from this, whether a program will produce desired outcome, sinasabi ito, hinahanap ng nasagot sa mga policymakers ay masasagot sa core question na may kaaya-aya ang kinalabasan. So the most important details in this text are that researcher and policy makers must identify the most important behavioral mechanism that produce the result and the future of situation that make them enough like the experimental situation, so that individual place in those like situation will interact with the concept in the same manner as the experimental subject did. So, researcher and policy, kailan nila natukoy ang mga mahalagang behavioral mechanism na magresulta na maaari itong gawin gabay ng mga tao na naka-experience ng same situation. So, in addition, policymakers must make additional interference to generalize beyond the particular instance on grounds other than the soundness of internal validity of the experiment. So, methodological transparency. Experiments have the virtue of employing a methodology that is more readily grasped than other evaluation methodologies. They are attractive because they promise to sidestep the debates of dueling with doctor that heighten the politicization of policy debates. Social experiments are attractive because they promise to sidestep the debates of two dueling the doctors. So now, that heighten the politicization of policy debates. Social scientists in general face the problem of not being able to produce tangible proof that social programs are working without simultaneously justifying and explaining methodology by which they arrive at their conclusion. So, ang social scientists, ang kadalasang kinaharap nila ay problema ay paano ba nila mapapatunayan na ang social programs ay epektibo na di kailangan ng mga justification or pagpapaliwanag ng methodology na napili. So, ethical justification, social experiments are now presumed to be appropriate except in special circumstances. Random assignment is a fair way of allocating scarce resources and determining whether programs benefit target population. It is important to know how much difference family background and education make to children's achievement. The idea of assigning parents to programs that increase their likelihood of developing positive relationship with one another and their children is considered ethical due to the methodology employed. However, researchers must ensure that the treatment and control groups are large enough to produce reliable estimate of the impact of the program. So, ang social experiment ay ngayon kaya napaka-importante malaman kung gaano ang pagkaiba ng family background and education para magawa ang achievement. So, thank you for listening.